Look, absolutely, and I think being a child from a family in the services, my grandfather fought in World War One in France. All of my uncles served in World War Two. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He was a disciplinarian in the Air Force, so he's the guy that walks around with the staff under his arm.
Yes.
And that whole culture of service, of giving, they were well and truly ingrained in me as a young boy.
Oh, mate, that's fantastic. Well, we can understand why and how you got to where you are at the moment. Now, you've been, you had the commonality between our teaching careers. Actually started at the same place, David. And where was that magnificent place where we started?
the best place you could possibly get posted to in Western Australia, as you know, Luke, at Halls Creek. And as a 20-year-old, I was when I first started teaching. We only did 3 years training in those days.
Yes,
to get placed like to a Halls Creek, it changes you in many ways. And I think that the most important way is it actually teaches you about disadvantage and about just how difficult some of our kids' lives are in relation just to functioning in the world, let alone coming to school. And on the other hand, just in terms of a learning opportunity and growing, it was unbelievable. And just to be 2 years there, I thought was a mammoth effort for me. But a few of the people that I worked with actually did 3 or 4 back in those days before there was anything called a remote.
That's right. I remember as that 20-year-old boy coming off the aeroplane, and the principal, Peter McLeod at that stage, driving down the street, and here's a boy from the western suburbs all of a sudden into remote Halls Creek. And it was very much a culture shift for myself, but great education, and certainly looking into resilience and the disadvantage of the community. Now, David, you've been in the game for 35 years. That's a pretty good career. You've certainly seen a few things.
Doesn't look it, does it, at all?
No, mate, you look like you've just come from Halls Creek.
Thank you.
Now, over that time, what would be, say, 3 lessons that you've learned in your area in education?
Three things that I've learned. Look, probably it's in and around the time I've done in school. So certainly wasn't an era where we all went to the bush, did 20 years of country teaching before coming back to the city. So I think the most important thing I've probably learned on that journey is just the different contexts that I've worked in, and the different schools and the different needs that kids have. But on that journey, it's also been about learning about how kids learn, and that every kid can be successful at school. That's probably the number one thing that I would identify. The second one is no matter that context that those kids are in, we can have high expectations of their learning. I do believe that there are principles that I come across, conversations I engage myself in, where you actually get a sense that principals feel that kids can only achieve a certain amount and are limiting in those capacities for kids. So having high expectations is something that we really strive for now, and it's about enabling kids to be able to achieve it. It's not looking at it as at the glass half full. That's 2. 3, I probably think as a system we can do better. We can collectively work better as a system to support kids, through culture and through the pedagogy that we use to ensure that our children are achieving much better than they are already.
That's fantastic. I know that's a real mantra there at Balladura, that it's every child matters every day. And that other one about having high expectations. And it's something that I've taken to other schools that I'm working with, that rather than seeing the child or where they are, for instance, their postcode, we're actually saying, no, let's get rid of that. And let's say every child has an opportunity given the resources that we have. And of course, we can always have more resources, but it's all about that passion and that drive.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, looking, going a bit further into that, over the years, you've spoken about a few of your mentors that have really shaped your career, and I know there's been 3 really important ones. David, what you want to give us a little bit more of an insight in some of these mentors and why you feel they're so important to your development?
I think in an overarching sense, Luke, for all the people that are listening, to have those people that you think are better than you is the important message here, and to talk to them about the journey that you're on, and how do I take the next step, and for that person to be able to honestly articulate, you know, these are the things that you're doing really well, but this is the next thing that you need to do. So whether you're a principal sitting online listening, whether you're a deputy principal or a teacher that wants to go further in their career, I can't emphasize enough having that mentor or a coach, and also using those resources. But the important thing, coming back the other way, is they actually believe in you. And you know, I'll come back to my Halls Creek days with Brian Simpson, who was my deputy principal at the time, very long time ago. Brian, funnily enough, is still in the game, you know, just taught me about resilience and keeping going. And I can remember going around to his house, you know, once a week saying, I can't do this anymore. This is really, really tough. And just teaching me about, you know, 1 foot and step in front of the other, keep going, keep improving as a teacher. And Brian was really good about teaching the basics in education. So he was really important to me. Lloyd Page would probably pop up into my mind, and Lloyd was my first principal at Kandoola. Once again, another very disadvantaged school. It was my first deputyship. I was about 28 years of age. Had no idea what I was doing coming into a city school, working with much older staff members. And he was all about just backing my capacity and my ability and have a go and try things. And you know, we've had this conversation, but I didn't really talk about this person. But over the last 15 years or so, I've been working very closely with John Fleming, who I see in terms of working in schools and understanding how schools operate, you know, the greatest educator there is currently in Australia. So constantly getting him to give me feedback and tell me what is next, and be clear and firm in that advice has assisted me so much on my journey.
Yeah, because you've already answered the question, but it's interesting that even now you still have someone that you have a conversation with. And I dare say there are most really times where we still have that internal story asking ourselves, it's getting harder. Do I need to be here? And I would believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you still come back to that. It's about every child matters every day, and that purpose that sits in front of you. Is that about where that scope sits to, and also having someone to have that conversation with?
Absolutely, Luke. And you know, people say, why haven't you left Balladura? Well, where does the journey end? You know, it's how long's a piece of string? How far can we take our kids? I'm sure everybody online today, just on the side here, can jump online and schools online and have a look at the school's results, certainly over, you know, the last 10 or 12 years, and they've been quite spectacular. But I genuinely believe that there's still more in us. We really can be the highest performing primary school, socially, emotionally and academically there is in WA, and it's about trying to find ways that we can achieve that. So it's not so much the big shifts and the big moves that we need to do now, it's more the fine grained stuff, but that journey continues.
Yeah. Now I'd like to share a little picture when we walk into Balladura. Can everyone see the little picture there?
Yep.
David, it's very prominent. You park your car, you're walking through into the admin building, and these are the 4 words that you actually see: inspire, participate, learn, and succeed. David, could you tell us a little bit about, number one, is why it's at the very front of the school, and you put some fairly big expense to create these commercial signs, and what does it mean to the rest of the community when you did that?
Yeah, it's about branding our message, Luke, and it's branding in such a way that they're just not words that we have on our wall, and sort of lots of schools do that, but but it's actually living true to what we've put there, and our job is to inspire. You know, we all go to barbecues, we all go to parties, we all talk to people about what was their schooling like, and you know, consistently we hear stories of, you know, I didn't like school, and you have to ask the question, why is it that we're pumping out so many kids that don't like school? Every kid should feel that they're succeeding at school. It doesn't mean they're the best in the class, but it means that they're being their best. So our job really is to inspire kids to lifelong learning, to see academic performance is important, to do their best. We want them to be genuine contributing members of our society. And if my staff of nearly 80 people aren't doing that, then I need to be asking questions as to why we're in the game. The participate one's about, you know, we're all going to have a go. So that's what we're asking you to do as a parent or a community member at our school, and that's what we're asking you to do as a child. We're just asking you to participate and give your best. You may not win on every occasion or get an A on your report, but we want you to engage. We want you to learn and do the very best that you can. A lot of the stuff that we do is leveled, so kids know what they're performing, where their performance is at, and what they're working towards in the next level. Really good example of that is PM reading levels. 30 is an independent reading level. So for our junior kids, they'll be able to say, I am on a PM level of 22, and I'm so excited to try and get to 24 as an example. And we need to give kids, you know, those pointers to know how they're going and how they're succeeding, which leads on to which is the last one, which is about success. And you know, I'd like to think that any of the people online today would come into the school and ask the kids at the school, are they the best school in Western Australia? And they would say yes, because they feel that their school and the work that they do is successful. So it's almost a hierarchy or a run of words that I came up with to say this is how we want to work through in order to achieve success. The colours are literally the house colours that we have at the school.
Right. Now, we're going to just take a couple of seconds for everybody online. I'd love you to just type in the chat, what would be or what are some of the values that you have at your school? Some of those same words, are they inspire, participate, learn and succeed? What sort of words do you have at your school that is language that we could ask a teacher if I walked into that school and said, what would be our values? What do they look like? So please, everyone, if you don't mind, if you could throw a couple of those words into the chat line and just to see what people have got and what's happening at their school. There we go. So we got one at young Bradley. He's talking about learn, safe and respect. It's a great one, that respect. And I dare say that comes out across from students and into the teachers. Margaret Pretty has got learn, grow and succeed. Track agreements, try your best, respect, appreciate. We've got inspire minds, create wisdom, connect people, build community, all through Strive from Taryn Murray down there at Warnborough Primary School. Absolutely fantastic. And when you start getting that sort of language that everyone understands, it gives us that clear message. And would that be right, David, at Balladura, where we have that clear message of values?
Just coming back to what you said, Luke, look, we've had a number of people come out and do reviews of the school and a number of reports written, a number of newspaper articles. And what continuously comes back as feedback from those reviewers is the way that the message is exactly the same from every staff member that they talk to, that they actually understand what those words are. As I say, we see those words being bandied around a lot in schools. And what the trick is to do is to possibly have somebody come in and say, well, does our ethos and our culture actually mirror those words that we've put up? Or, you know, as you've said, we've branded them on the front of the school. There's no hiding from them. Everybody can see them when they pull up at the front of the school. So, you know, doing that, you know, was a bit of a brave thing because we wanted to really make sure that that we put it in such a way that we had to live up to those words. So it's not just about the words, it's about living those words, and it's about, for the principals that are listening online today, it's about walking the walk. It's about, you know, being seen, being visible, communicating those messages, and it's almost like living that more than just saying that.
Fantastic, absolutely. And I do see it there at Belladura, as I also see it at Warnbrook when I'm down there as well. Now, David, we've been delving into culture, school culture, and recently you took part in my school culture survey. We looked at the students and the parents and the teachers and the staff and the admin, and we collated some fantastic data. And it was like a triangulation of what the students thought and what the teachers thought about areas of school culture. Now, because you're in that area, I'd be really interested, would you like to share the sorts of insights that came from that survey and the sorts of things that the celebrations and also some of the challenges that
Yeah, love to. Look, I'll take a step back before we actually get to that point. You know, and as Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So as educators, we've probably heard that saying a gazillion times, but I'll constantly communicate. If you don't get the culture in the school right, you know, there's no way that we're going to be able to get our curriculum working the way that we want to. So culture is the most important thing that we can possibly do in our schools, and understanding what culture is. And you know, you and I have talked about even, you know, having a list of words that we put behind our desk every day and measure ourselves against, because you know, that will actually determine the success in our school. But at Belladura, what we wanted to do was be really clear and transparent in relation to all of the data that we collect, and in many different forms. I've been working with you for many years in relation to that. And interestingly, in our latest round of questionnaires, which we assisted you to develop, which go much deeper than the department ones that we've historically used, we identified some of our students, particularly our older students, weren't enjoying school that much, even though they were really high performing kids. So we actually continued that journey with you by getting you to sit with one of my associate principals, get some focus groups to sit down and talk to the kids about why they put those responses on the questionnaire, and then went out to our community and said, look, these are some of the things that the kids are saying. And over this year particularly, we've been trying to identify with staff how we better form relationships, deeper relationships. Because what I would argue is we've got staff members who believe schooling and teaching is one thing, and they have good relationships with kids. But then you get the data and you say, but hang on, let's have a look at what some of these kids are saying. Clearly, we can't be coming from the perspective that you have. We need to be coming from the perspective that kids have. And kids are changing. You know, we talked about my age and how long I've been in the game. Kids aren't the same kids necessarily. They're the same kids, but they don't think the same way as they did 35 years ago. They are much more aware that if little Johnny sitting next to them is being told off by the teacher for not doing their homework, that they're just going to go, great, that's not me, I'm happy. They're actually going to empathise with that kid next door, and they're going to say, well, I don't like that teacher that much because that teacher publicly told off that child about not doing their homework, a practice that 20 years ago would have been perfectly acceptable. So there's some of the things, you know, that we've been trying to broach with staff, and some of our staff are very, very experienced, been teaching 40 years, and getting them to try and understand we need to come more from a kid's perspective.
Yeah. And that conversation about culture and working that through, we've seen that there's it's like, now that we put it on the table and we've got data to talk about it, the conversation about culture isn't just similar to your values. They're actually conversations that are being had by all stakeholders, which then brings it to light. And I believe that's what's happening really well at Belladura, but also that you're not afraid to say, yes, we're high performing, but also we've got some areas that we're prepared to work in as well. I think that's testament to your leadership.
And you know, and right from the time that I've come to Ballajura, I've been very clear about the data doesn't lie. So let's not try and make excuses in and around, testing, diagnoses, or the data is the data, and it's the way that we respond to it that's important.
Absolutely. And look, we've just got another five minutes or so, and I just wanted to, there is a question that I think most principals would go through, and it comes back to when working with your mentor in regards to the, those times when it gets really tough, and I know principals are under a lot of pressure, etc. Just one example or one time where you had adversity, and then how you got out from that adversity. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's finished by any means, but just what is that little process that you do? And it might be back to your mentor, for I know. So yeah, what an adversity story and how you got out would be if you'd like to share that with us, David.
I know we've got a lot of time, but there's probably two, but I'll start with the one that probably most people are going to relate to, and that is working with staff that are difficult. And I love your little story, and if anybody here online has heard it, you'll talk about, there are teachers that are speedboats, and they'll jump on board immediately with something that are happening. There are some staff members that are more like the cruise liners, and they take a little bit longer to turn around, but they'll come on the journey. And then you've got your submarines, and they're the really difficult staff members that we have. Probably what I've learned going all the way back to those Halls Creek days and all the country postings that I've done is persistence is the winner. And when you've got teachers that are submarines and they're really difficult to work with, it's trying to understand what are the reasons that they're being so difficult and trying to expose those. I would argue that 9 times out of 10 that it's actually in and around fear. You take the fear away, you take the expectation of what you're asking them to do in such a way that they can achieve it, that you'll start to move those people on. We need to also remember that some of the people that are in our system have been burnt by our system, by the system itself, by principals, by school culture, time and time again. So therefore become very resistant purely because of the cultures that they've been over in an extended period of time. So that would be my number one sort of thing that I'd offer. And in any school, you will always probably have those 3 groups of teachers or staff members. And it's how we deal with them as leaders that's more important than going, I wish I didn't have them, because they are going to be there. But look, that persistence, resilience, removing the fear, having honest conversations, and they've been interesting for me over the journey. Sometimes I've gone into a conversation thinking somebody is going to come at me aggressively, to find that that's not the reason at all. And unless you're prepared to have a difficult conversation, you're never actually going to deeply understand why somebody thinks the way they do. Very quickly, the other struggle that we've had this year is my associate principal passed away, Jane Scorer, and I had worked with her for 15 years. Very much loved by staff, and that's been a big journey for us this year, and we're continuing that journey as we speak.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I took away that persistence. I took away, interesting enough, what is the fear? Why are they in that submarine that they can't surface and then get on the cruise liner? Thank you very much for that. Now, what I'd like to do is now open it up to the floor. Everybody's, dare say, been patiently listening, which is all the words of wisdom. Now, is there any questions that you would like to ask? And this time, rather than on the chat room, I'm more than happy for you to unmute if you have a question for David or myself that he can shed some light onto it. So is there maybe Alan or Margaret, Chris, Nolene, Taryn, Bradley? Is there any question that you'd like to ask my good friend David before we finish up? Because I have got one more question for David as we go. Okay, looks like we've pretty well secured the audience here, David. You've done very well. David, now there is a let me just
Absolutely, Nolene. Just give me a buzz.
Okay, that's good, good. Now let me just, I'm just trying to find something here, David. Just wait a minute.
It's one of the famous photos, I think.
It is one of the famous photos that I thought I might finish up with.
Ever since the school opened in 1989. And when I came to the school, changed the day to make it more representative of the arts and culture, and make it much more community involved. And I think where Luke's going from here is, if you're going to do something like that, I'm a big believer that you've got to lead from the front. So every year I will dress up in some sort of spectacular outfit, and the community are all waiting upon whatever the theme is. That was an Australiana theme, as to what I'm going to wear. So it fits in, Luke, with leading from the front, to being visible, to engaging with the community. There'll be 200 or 300 parents waiting for me to walk out the office door each year to simply take snaps to put them on Facebook, because this is what Mr. Wanstall's wearing this year.
That's right. We're going to end it there, and I want to end on that note. You've already used a couple of those words that I love as a principle: being visible, leading from the front, and to a certain degree, being a bit vulnerable when you put on all the face mask and all that costume that you wear. And for those people that don't know or haven't seen David's office, on the back he has all the photos of the characters that he's dressed up as throughout the year, and it really is really a testament to David Wanstall's leadership.